With the Bleach anime returning in 2022, I thought I might like to tackle one of the most controversial versus battles within the Bleach fandom, that being Aizen versus Yamamoto. Now, this won't be structured like your typical versus battle or power scaling video. I'll basically be giving two interpretations to how this fight could possibly go. And I'm joined here with Khan and Bubbles.
Yo, what's good, y'all? My name is Khan, otherwise known as Joining Khan, and I make Bleach videos, and I hope y'all enjoyed this video.
My name is Bubbles. I don't make videos, but I'm still better than Khan.
And we starting off the video with lies, bro. Let's go.
Khan's channel will be linked in the description. Bubbles doesn't have a channel, but he's still really knowledgeable on Bleach, so I thought I might like to bring him on this video just to give his little interpretation of the battle. Bubbles, you can start off with how you think Aizen versus Yamamoto will go.
Before we hop into it, I would like for it to be known, the part me and Bubbles will be arguing over is base Aizen versus Yamamoto, and not the transcended version of Aizen. That'll be more clear when the arguments start, but I just want to tell y'all now. So Bubbles will start off with why he thinks base Aizen beats Yamamoto.
Okay, so as for my take on Aizen versus Yamamoto, I think base Aizen is more than strong enough to handle Yamamoto even in his Bankai form, and I'll be going into why. The first thing that's interesting to bring up is that it's stated in the first data book of Bleach that Aizen has a matchless combat ability, and a lot of people are trying to bring up that this says it only covers chapters 172 to 175, but in chapter 173 we actually see Yamamoto fighting Shinsu and Ukitake, so we do actually see Yamamoto fight within these chapters, and Aizen is still considered matchless compared to this, so this is the first thing that should put Aizen as stronger than Yamamoto. And then the second thing is it stated that Aizen was stronger than anybody else, and this gave him a deep sense of loneliness in the third data book. And this is consistent with what Ichigo thought. After he fought Aizen, he said that he could finally understand his feelings because he was closer to him in power. And he talked about this previously back in Hueco Mundo. He said as he's gotten stronger, whenever he's close to people in power, he can feel their feelings better through his blade. And when he was finally, obviously able to clash with Aizen, beat his ass, all that, he said that all he could sense was loneliness through his blade. So he theorized that Aizen never actually wanted to win because he was so much stronger than everyone else. He always just wanted to be regular. So the Hogyoku didn't really reject him, it just forced him to lose. So this data book's consistent with the narrative the series is already pushing, and then it's supported by a previous statement calling it matchless. And then on top of this, Aizen himself seems to think he's unsurpassed multiple times. He said that he's unsurpassed in Soul Society, so that would even further support this idea of Aizen being this unsurpassed force within Soul Society. I'm sure plenty of y'all are thinking, well, that's just also what's stated, right? Well, what does he actually do? And one of the things that he does manage to do is Ido Kaso, which was Yamamoto's suicide attack, or not suicide, but last resort attack he tried to use on Aizen, where he blew up his own arm. It's actually stated in the volume extras to be his true power, so that should mean that Ido Kaso is the strongest thing Yamamoto's using, or capable of using, since it sacrifices part of his body. And even though Aizen was not expecting this attack, he took it to the face and then came away with scuff marks on his clothing, and proceeded to be able to still fight Ichigo. And the interesting about this is that Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho did even more damage to Aizen than Ido Kaso did, and then when Aizen finally gets on guard, he's able to swat away Getsuga Tensho with his bare hands. This should mean that Aizen can swat away attacks stronger than Yamamoto's Bankai with his bare hands, and he's, as previously stated, already said to be above him. So then, I'm sure plenty of people will bring up the statements that Aizen makes saying that Yamamoto, would probably beat him. That's why he made Wonderwise, right? It's stated multiple times in both data books and the manga. It's stated by Kanamura, it's stated in the data books multiple times that Aizen lies in character consistently. So these statements he makes about Yamamoto are most likely just to mess with him, because as I said previously, it's way more consistent with feats in the narrative for Aizen to be stronger. And then the data book statement calling Yamamoto unsurpassed, this shows a picture of bare-fisted Yamamoto, and the context of the scene is that he had lost his Bankai, so likely this would be referring to his hand-to-hand skill, right? That bare-fisted, he can beat anybody else bare-fisted, but of course that's not how Bleach characters normally fight. They have their Zanpakutos, so with their full capabilities, it seems that Aizen would still be stronger.
So, of course, I don't agree with the arguments Bubbles presented, so I will be telling y'all my arguments for why I think Yamamoto beats base Aizen. so let's hop into it. So to start off my scaling, I like to go in chronological order. So in the Camp for Your Own World novels, when Tokinata was fighting Shuhei, he talked to him about why Kisuke crew would create the Hogyoku, and he brings up how in those days no being could have defeated Yamamoto, which would include Aizen, so Kisuke would gain nothing from making anyone stronger. And for context, Tokinata would be referring to around a little over 100 years ago, around the time of Turn Back the Pendulum. This statement just blatantly puts Yamamoto above Aizen, and we really don't have a reason to believe Lieutenant Aizen got stronger during that period to the FKT arc, and it would make more sense for Aizen to not have gotten stronger because he had already started his plans for making the Hogyoku, implying that he had already reached his limits as a Shinigami, which is what the Hogyoku was meant to surpass. Fast forward 100 years, Yamamoto is stated to have very high spiritual pressure, and even in the Shikai state, he can turn everything before it to ash. It is also stated to be the most terrible, oldest, and greatest of all Zanpakuto. So we're already getting a glimpse into Yamamoto's narrative of having the strongest Zanpakuto, and the only way you can have the greatest Zanpakuto of all time is if you had spiritual pressure matching up to that. It is blatantly seen multiple times that characters with overpowered hacks have overpowered spiritual pressure to match. Otherwise, Yamamoto's flames would just be normal everyday flames, as seen when Tokinata used Ryujin Jaka. So if you were to have the strongest Zanpakuto, you would most likely be the strongest character. So Aizen, being one of the most intelligent characters in the verse, knew about Yamamoto's lore, which is why he created Wonder Weeds. So let's get into that. In the Bleach data book, it states verbatim that Aizen was cautious of Yamamoto, who not only possessed the most powerful Zanpakuto, but also had the title of the strongest in each one of the 4 arts of combat. That being Zenjutsu, which is sword fighting, Hakudo, which is hand-to-hand combat, Ho-Ho, which is high-speed movement, and Kido, which is spells. And because of this, Aizen took precaution against Yamamoto with the creation of a specialized Arankar. The very fact that Aizen had to create a precaution against Yamamoto implies some sort of relativity. Obviously, this possibility doesn't exist with other characters because Aizen is blatantly above them people, but the very fact that Aizen created a plan at the very least means Yamamoto has enough AP to damage or kill Aizen to stop his plans. And that would be Shikai Yamamoto alone, because there is no way in hell Yamamoto would activate his Bankai in the world of the living. Moving on, in the beginning of the battle in Fake Hardcore Town, Yamamoto surrounds Gen, Tosin, and Aizen in his flames, which leads to Gen stating that they can't participate unless the flames are taken away, which would make no sense if Aizen could casually swat away his flames. Later on in the arc, Yamamoto activates the Netsuji Goku, which has Aizen in Visible Shock, and tells Aizen they will both die in this burning hell. I've seen people say Yamamoto needed to kill himself and use his most powerful attack to kill Aizen, but that's blatantly ignoring context. Clearly, Aizen did have Kyoku Suigetsu, which casts illusion, so Aizen could be anywhere in the battlefield at that specific moment. So what Yamamoto was most likely thinking when he was building up that attack is, let me surround the entire battlefield with my flames so there is no possible way that he can escape. Additionally, Yamamoto is seen later on tanking the entirety of his Shikai flames with his base body alone, meaning he would have died from the attack regardless. Aizen says that without question, Ryujin Jaka is the most powerful Zanpakuto, and if they were to fight directly in a one-on-one situation, Yamamoto would probably win. Wonder Witch was created so that he could oppose the ultimate in reference to Yamamoto's power. Some people like Bubbles like to argue he was lying at this point. You can also say the Aizen statement he uses is cap, when in reality there is no reason for Aizen to be lying to Yamamoto and boosting his ego. Yamamoto is not going to be like, oh, you're right, I am stronger than you, let me hold back, or some shit. Like, Aizen gains nothing from lying in this situation. He's just spitting facts that has been supported by the databooks and Yamamoto's lore. After losing his Shikai powers, Yamamoto states he would still slap Aizen without it, and the reason why he was captain commander for 1,000 years is because no Shinigami stronger than him has emerged during that time, which would include Aizen. After bodying Wonder Weeds without his Zanpakuto, he's still confident he can slap Aizen. A lot of people bring up how Aizen was able to take a Hado 96 from Yamamoto, but ignore the fact that Yamamoto had just finished taking the entire release of his Shikai flames at one time, so he was heavily fatigued and weakened. In Bleach, your life energy is equal to your spiritual energy, and Yamamoto is basically on his deathbed, yet still put scratches on Aizen. Matter of fact, what y'all gonna do if I say Yamamoto blitzed Aizen right here, right now? I don't want to hear none of that. In the data book, it states verbatim that Yamamoto is unsurpassed for 1,000 years, meaning Aizen is not a threat. And this is stated twice, so it's just saying, without his Zanpakuto, he would still body the fuck out of Aizen without his Shikai. And with his Shikai, it's overkill. You might hear dumb arguments like Bubbles' argument, where he says like, it's just referring to hand-to-hand combat. Well, that's very much a reach. Aizen at that point still had his Zanpakuto, so it is what it is, but it's just stated verbatim that he would lose. You need to do a lot of mental gymnastics to try and go around this scan. Now let's talk about the databook statement Bubbles uses. This statement does not have to be referring to base Aizen at all. It's more consistent and non-contradicted that it's referring to translated Aizen here, who is truly more powerful than anyone else until he gets surpassed by Dangai Ichigo. Aizen was strong and did have exceptional power since birth, but people thinking he's the strongest ever since he came out the womb is pretty dumb and contradicted by the fact that Yamamoto had been unsurpassed for 1,000 years, and clearly Aizen was born in those 1,000 years. So obviously one argument leads to a contradiction, while the other more logical interpretation doesn't have to lead to a contradiction and follows with the other statements that happen in the same data book.
Now that they've both given their arguments in whole and their interpretations of how this fight would go, I will leave it up to the viewer, you, to guess which interpretation you want to go with, which one you think is the most consistent. Now, this is the part of the video where both of them kind of combine their opinions, because we all agree here that Transcended Aizen would beat up Yamamoto, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So we can go on to why now.
Right.
Getting into that, when Aizen enters his cocoon and becomes transcended, high-level Shinigami like Kisuke and Ishin are unable to sense his Ryatsu at all. Similar how a Shinigami can't be sensed by humans, it's the same in this situation, just on another level.
Like I said before, the purpose of the Hogyoku was to help Aizen go beyond the limits of a Shinigami, right? So Aizen at this point should be completely beyond anything a Shinigami and even a Hollow can perform, and that is implied multiple times. And Yamamoto just being a normal Shinigami, Aizen would also be transcendent of him too.
Even if you want to say Yamamoto could damage Aizen in his cocoon state, or even after, it doesn't really matter, as Aizen just continues to evolve constantly, and his butterfly form is just so far above the cocoon form that Yamamoto would not be able to overcome this kind of power.
To further submit Transcended Aizen being superior to Yamamoto, it's stating in the extra chapters that if Aizen and Gin create Oken, it'll seal the Soul Society's doom. Aizen's original plan after doing this was to go to the Zero Squad and try and defeat them. As stated by Ichibei, the original plan of Aizen is to go and actually fight the Zero Division, so if you could not defeat all the Zero Division, it would not spell Soul Society's doom. Now, this is important as the Zero Division is stated to be stronger than the entire Gote put together, which obviously includes Yamamoto plus all the other captains together.
The last form of Aizen that appears in the manga and the strongest form is Chair Aizen or Muken Aizen. Most people for some reason think he's lost his Hogoku or somehow got weaker in some way, but in the novels it's actually stated that he retained the Hogoku and along with all of its abilities.
So the best feats for Aizen in this arc is being able to tank a direct attack from Soul King Amp U-Haul and also slice his Ryatsu in half. So Aizen was able to contest a fight relative to this U-Haul that not only absorbed the Soul King, but Ichigo's power, draw, drew him, and all the other Sternriders that died. Obviously this U-Haul should be multiple tiers higher than the U-Haul that defeated Ichibei and take the level of Yamamoto's Bankai.
To further support Aizen in Thousand Year Blood War being superior to Yamamoto, it is stated that 5 special threats were chosen because of their, quote, incalculable aspects. These 5 were Ichigo, Kenpachi, Ichibei, Aizen, and Kisuke. Aizen's trait was chosen because of his Ryatsu, or spiritual pressure. Ryatsu and spiritual pressure consistent in the series of Bleach are correlated to strength and decide Shinigami battles. So this means Aizen, Thousand Year Blood War, should have the highest spiritual pressure of anyone these Sternriders would possibly have to deal with, meaning that Aizen should be stronger than any of the Gote members, obviously.
With that being said, this is the end of the video. As you can see, with all we've given you, Aizen kind of beats him up pretty badly. It's not a fair matchup post base. Base, you can take away what you want to take away from that portion of the video. This was Khan's first appearance on the channel. We will be doing more collabs in the future probably. He makes good Bleach content. Go check him out if you're like a huge Bleach fan. Yeah, goodbye. Hogoku, Hogoku, Hogoku.